Have you ever felt like you are living someone else's life? Like you are on a stage, acting out lines you didn't write, inhabiting a body that responds to the commands of routine, but inside feels like a cold, silent dessert? There's something worse than being lost in the world. It is being lost to yourself. Carl Jung dedicated his life to understanding an invisible structure that sustains your sanity, something called the ego-self axis. It is a transmission line, a psychic umbilical cord that connects your conscious I to the source of all your meaning and mystery. The problem is that, in most of us, this line isn't just worn out. It has snapped, and when this cord breaks, you don't notice it immediately through some grand catastrophic event. The disaster is silent. It is a slow erosion. It is the moment when color fades from the world, when achievements lose their flavor, and you become a functional shell, a biological robot operating in the void. If you feel this abyss opening under your feet, or if you just want to understand why modern anguish seems so incurable, you need to stay here until the very last second. What we are going to explore today isn't cheap self-help. It is an anatomy of your soul. If you are looking for answers that common logic cannot provide, subscribe now and turn on notifications. The content we produce here is a map for those who are tired of surfaces. By subscribing, you accept the invitation to the most dangerous and necessary journey of all, the return home, to your center. Leave a like if you feel your soul has something to say, but you haven't learned how to listen yet. Imagine this axis as the electrical wiring of a great cathedral. The ego is just the switch, the small lamp that illuminates the altar. The self, on the other hand, is the power plant, the architect, and the very structure of the cathedral itself. When the axis is healthy, energy flows. You have intuition, you have purpose, you have a visceral sense that, despite the difficulties, you are exactly where you should be. But what happens when the wire is cut? The lamp of the ego keeps trying to shine, but it no longer has a source. It begins to flicker, to short circuit, desperately trying to extract energy from the wrong places, from consumption, from the approval of others, from addictions, or from a frantic search for control. The ego alone is an impotent master. It tries to rule a kingdom it doesn't hold the keys to. And this is the origin of all the neurotic anxiety that consumes us. This rupture manifests first as a loss of vitality. You know what I'm talking about, that sudden feeling that the meaning of life has slipped down an invisible drain. You look at your work, your relationships, your own face in the mirror and ask, is this it? This is the first sign that the self has stopped sending signals to your consciousness. The self is the center of totality, the master who knows your real destiny, and if it withdraws, the ego is orphaned. It is like a captain on a ship in the middle of a storm who discovers the compass was stolen and the radio is dead. You keep sailing, of course, but to where? Alienation from the self is the deepest illness of our time, and it transforms us into ghosts of ourselves, wandering through malls and social media trying to fill a hole that has no bottom, because the hole is not a lack of things, but a lack of being. Often, what we call depression is actually what the ancients called the dark night of the soul. Jung saw this as a defense mechanism of the psyche itself. If you are following a path that denies your essence, the self pulls the emergency brake. It withdraws the libido, the vital energy, from your conscious activities. It throws you into bed, into the dark, into silence, not to destroy you, but to force you to look inward. It is a necessary isolation. The collapse is the self shouting, stop running the wrong way. If you ignore this call and try to medicate yourself just to be productive again, without changing the route, you are just putting duct tape on a high voltage wire that is catching fire. The cure is not going back to what you were before, because what you were before is what caused the rupture. The cure is the reconstruction of the bridge. There are two mortal dangers in this process: inflation and alienation. Inflation happens when the ego thinks it's the greatest thing ever. It thinks, I am the self, I am God, I control everything. It is the delusion of omnipotence we see in narcissistic leaders or in ourselves when we think our conscious will can bend reality. The inflated ego is like a balloon rising into a vacuum. It will eventually pop. Alienation is the opposite. It is the ego that feels like trash, a valueless speck of dust. Both are states of rupture. In the first, the ego swallowed the axis. In the second, the ego lost sight of it. Real balance is the humility of knowing you are a channel. You are not the light. You are the glass the light passes through. If the glass is dirty with selfishness or cracked with self-contempt, the light of the self cannot illuminate the world. In this darkness, dreams become the last letters the self can send to the ego. When direct communication fails, the unconscious uses symbols. You dream you are falling, that you are lost in an unknown house, or that there is an intruder trying to enter your room. These are not just random firings of neurons. They are dramatic attempts by your soul to show you where the connection was cut. The intruder in the dream might be a part of you that you denied, and that now needs to be integrated, so the axis can stabilize. If you don't listen to your dreams, the self begins to whisper through the body. Psychosomatic illness is the soul's last attempt to be heard. What the mind denies, the body confesses. Gastritis, chronic back pain, a migraine. Sometimes they are just the ego self-axis, trying to say the voltage is wrong. Nature, however, loves balance, and it sends you external signs, synchronicities. You know when you think of a deep problem and suddenly a phrase in a book, a conversation between strangers, or an unlikely event seems to give you the exact answer. Jung called this a wink from the universe. It is the self proving to the ego that reality is not just matter, that an invisible order exists. Synchronicity is the ego self-axis extending outside your head and touching the world. It is an invitation for you to trust the process of life again. It is proof that, although you feel alone, the center of your psyche is in constant dialogue with the center of the cosmos itself. Often, for communication to be re-established, the ego needs to go through a symbolic death. This happens in great rites of passage and midlife crises. Everything you built, your career, your image, your certainties needs to crumble so the true foundation can appear. It is a painful process, like a bone that was broken and healed crooked and now needs to be broken again to be aligned. But do not fear the break. The self is the archetype of the guide. It possesses internal figures, like the wise old man or the great mother, who appear to guide us when we are willing to admit we don't know the way. The crisis is not the end. It is the beginning of your real initiation. Individuation, the ultimate goal of Jungian psychology, is exactly the state where the ego self-axis is fully functional. It is not about being perfect. It is about being whole. It is the state where the ego accepts its position as a satellite orbiting the sun of the self. When this happens, life gains a quality of destiny. You stop fighting the current and start swimming with it. Choices become clear, not through cold logic, but through a silent certainty emanating from the chest. You become an individual, someone who can no longer be divided, someone who is no longer a mass of social cliches, but a unique expression of life. Restoring this axis is the most urgent task of your existence. If you reach the end of life with a lot of money and fame, but with a broken ego self-axis, you will have died before your heart even stopped. You will have been a tourist in your own biography. But if you have the courage to look into the void, to interpret your dreams, to accept your shadow, and to bow before the immensity of yourself, you will discover that heaven and hell are not places one goes to, but states of connection or disconnection that you carry right now inside you. The wire is there. It might be hanging by a thread, but it hasn't disappeared. All it takes is a moment of absolute honesty for the first spark to jump back across.